The town of Farmington. Respecting history, planning the future.
Farmington, and ask you to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I would like to ask anyone who has public comment to come up to the microphone, and you have 5 minutes, and please give us your name and address. And if you're a student, please don't give us your address.
My name is Stacy Petrozzella, and I live at 32 High Street. I attended the May 15th joint board meeting between the Town Council and the Board of Education, where I was happy to hear about your collective commitment to increasing public participation in putting forth a new proposal for the high school after last year's failed referendum vote. What was not acknowledged during the meeting, but needs to be considered, is in the lead up to the vote, a well-funded misinformation campaign deliberately misled our community about the project and may have influenced votes. Because of the misleading information put forth by responsible FHS, it is impossible to know who voted against the high school project as proposed by Town Council and who voted against it based on inflammatory and false information. The referendum failed, and that is a fact. I am here tonight to encourage all Town Council members to be very careful in drawing conclusions about why it failed, or upholding the referendum's failure as a mandate to bias the process towards a renovation-only option. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Okay. We'll continue and now go on to item D.
I move to consider the attached Town of Farmington strategic plan / town manager goals.
Second.
And I'd like to have a vote on the motion to consider these, on this motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. We are going to now discuss the town manager goals that we have before us, the revised goals. What I would like to do is go through each goal at a time and move forward, for instance, goal 2, and have a motion for that goal, and then we will discuss that goal, make any changes we find in the goal that we would like to discuss, and then move forward goal 2. Go to goal 3, goal 4, go right on through. Once the goals are discussed, then go back and talk about priorities for our whole town manager set of goals. I don't think we can do that until we go through all of the goals. And then once we do, talk about that as far as setting priorities. So I'd like to start with goal 2 and begin a discussion of that and start with a motion to consider that.
I move to consider goal 2 for discussion.
Well, why don't we wait? Yeah.
Okay.
I think it should be the motion to approve goal 2. And then you'll discuss it, make any amendments that you'd want to make.
Okay.
And then you'll vote on it.
Okay. So I'll start all over. I move to approve goal 2.
Second.
Discussion. Are there changes that people would like, or Kathy, do you want to
Yeah, do you want me to
discuss a
just
piece
kind
of
of-
it first?
Yeah,
And your sheet that you wanted to, that you
Right.
have.
So what I tried to do is I was trying to use Bruce's suggestion with the T-shirt sizes and some different things, but the things that you guys had come up with, it was, time frame, cost, complexity, and then I did staff workload and town council workload because they could be different things. And then I used this, red, yellow, green, and again, I thought that was good colors because people usually understand what red and yellow and green means. And red, the time frame would be immediate, the cost would be potentially for high cost, the complexity would be high, and the staff and the town council workload would be high. Medium, the time frame would be 3 to 12 months, and then medium cost, complexity, workload, and green, 12 to 24 months, and low cost, low and medium. The visual was just so you could see if it has all reds, you know it's high cost, potentially high cost, high staff, high complexity. If it's all greens, it's probably less than that. So when you work through the topics, you can kind of see where they would go on workload and complexity and money. I think, though, it should be noted that until the complexity is finalized and the committees are charged, these rankings could change. They could, you know, if it goes, like I said, the bike committee, if they come up with a charge that is something that's very substantial for money, then obviously that icon would change. So again, it's just a starting point and where we're at. And then just to let you know, I added a few other things just to be consistent so we could see a full picture, is that right now we have 4 kind of standing committees, a bike committee, a land committee, a Yukon subcommittee, and a green efforts committee. And then based on the discussion and what we talked about last week, there was 8 additional committees added for a total of 12 committees. So I do think that that's a tremendous workload on both the staff and on the town council, and some of these topics could potentially be very complex that need to be studied at length. So I think that when we go through this, you know, I think making some priorities and possibly ranking things as 1s and 2s as we go along for a course of a year, where this document is not a set in stone, and that it would move as goals are accomplished. The goals that are set as number 2 would move to the top, and we can also, when some of these goals are looked at, again, because there's a lot of it needs to be studied, so depending on what some of these goals, what's studied, what charges come out, this document is going to have to move again. And but I think this is a good starting point, and that's where we are. And if we just look at goal 2, which we just did, that's from pages 1 through 7. And as we talked about it at the last time, I think the goal 1 on the right-hand column is something that, you know, I think more information is needed, and it could be included as part of another goal, but I didn't set that up as a special committee, but it could. Goal 2 is this Farmington Center. As you can see by it's all red. That's going to be a lot of complex and a lot of staff work, and it's going to cost money. The page 3 is just again trying to compare on the staff. This is a high-level staff job. It's high intensity. And then I wanted to add in the green is something that you talked about, review the options of post-construction traffic. So I added that in, Edward. So okay. I did add that right in there because you mentioned that. Goal 4, again, recommending no change. It's mid-range for staff. Goal 5, the bicycle committee, again, depending on what comes out, but it's mid-range, and the timing, at least where they are today, you know, if you decide to meet every week or, you know, more than that, that would change. Goal 6 is sidewalks. Again, I think there's a lot of potential red on that. If there's going to be a substantial change of policy, it would be a staff. It's very complex. It costs a lot of money. So there's more red and yellow on that one. Goal 7 is our water pollution control. Again, monitoring that project. It's staff intensive. Goal 8, that was added from your discussion at the last meeting, to create an ad hoc facility committee to perform comprehensive facility study of all municipal buildings. I think it's probably red to some of the staff time and money, but green on complexity and things of that nature, and it doesn't have to start immediately. Goal 9 is ad hoc for the Farmington Cemetery. Again, I don't think it has to start immediately. It is something that's going to happen, but it's not a red at the first for timing. But it is quite a bit of staff work, and it will have a lot of complexity to it. Goal 10 is medium with the staff. Goal 11 was something I added just because I thought it just to be consistent. I put the land acquisition group on, and I just put the yellows and greens for that. Unless things change substantially, that's what I would say the staff time is. Goal 12 is a Yukon committee, which is all green, which, oh, sorry.
Seven.
That's it. Okay. Thank you, Bruce.
So questions for Kathy on these?
So, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just a point of clarification. So, as we go through this and as we consider some of these topics or talk about some of these topics, this document, it's very high level in some aspects because we need a committee to further define it. The expectation of this document would be considered a fluid document in a way that, you know, we're giving the town manager direction, but knowing that as the committee comes back with updates and gives the town council updates, that perhaps adjustments may be made within this document.
Absolutely. I think I think that there's two things that have to be somewhat have clarity though, is that because a lot of these goals are new and they need to be studied, and there's going to be a lot that comes out of it, like you just described. And so in that way, in my mind, it's a fluid document because the charge is going to change, those things are going to change. But what the purpose of this document though is that your resources, my time, the staff time, is all heading down the same path. What I wouldn't want to happen when you say a fluid document is that, again, if it has to do with the topic, absolutely. But what you don't want to see happen, and what would defeat the purpose, is that at every meeting, another topic gets added in that's not part of these. And so then that gets very confusing, and then where do you spend your money? So as the goals evolve, that would be changing. But again, every time something comes in and says, well, now I want to look at this topic, and now I want to look at this topic. This really should be your main priorities that are driving us. And as we finish them, then new things come in, new topics. But one of the things that I've been trying, which the council has been very good in the past, is that if something has come up, and again, it's a big, complex organization, that things, you know, come up and I do different things, obviously, but if something winds up spending a lot of mine or the staff's time, I like it to be in the goals, because then you're aware that I have all of a sudden some kind of shift of priority has come. Something happens, you know, and they say it's a major issue that just happens. And I say, you know, if it's a month's worth of major issue, we take care of it and it's done. But if it turns into a 6-month, I've come back to the council and have said, this is something really we should have it as a goal. It should be a new goal. But in general, it's not good practice to keep on picking and choosing, because then no one knows what the direction is of what we're focusing on.
Sure. And just to add one more question, if I may. I know we're not at the priority part of this conversation yet, but as we look at this document, and I'm throwing this out there, if there's something that, you know, we may think that it's a very low priority, but we still want it in the document because it's going to show up on there, and if the town has the time to get to it, because it would be ranked low, we would give direction to you saying these are the top priorities, but if something is low, it would still show up on this document. And then I just want to clarify that. So as we look at this document, we're not necessarily, we could, I'm not saying that we won't, we could take something off or add something in, but the thought process is it's going to stay on this document, it'll be prioritized, and if it's something low, it may or may not get done within that time frame.
Exactly.
Okay.
And some of the things may happen in that something may get done quicker than something else, than we thought. And then when we're talking about it again in January, when we talk about the whole piece, we may say, gee, we need to move this, bump this up to priority 2 now. And it was on the bottom, but we really need to make sure that becomes part of our discussion for the next few months. And that clearly happens and has happened before. And it just depends on, as Kathy said, what works in the town, and if something happens that we didn't foresee. That certainly is something to include or exclude, depending on what happens. So I think we all need to understand that and go into that knowing that this is, that's what the fluidity is.
And again, one of the things too is that some of these things, especially if it becomes a 2 or a 3, I'm just saying for priorities, a 2 or a 3, and that doesn't necessarily mean if there's time, which sometimes there is that the legwork of the staff, they may be doing things to get ready for the goal because they know it's coming up. And so especially if it's a substantial change, if it has to do with sidewalks, they may be reviewing town sidewalks and doing that. But it's still a 2 or 3, meaning that they may not be able to do that, but they know it's on the plan. And this is why the strategic plan is so important, is because it says, okay, so I have some capacity to do something. I see in my goals that there's something coming up with sidewalks. I should be directing my staff and me to be looking into researching this versus doing something else.
Thank you.
Other questions for Kathy?
Kathy, I have kind of an overall question.
Sure.
That would help me.
Yep.
As we drill down to
Yeah.
specific goals. So right now, the way the town strategic plan is structured is it's 6 town manager goals, right? Education, transportation and land. And then we go to 3, economic development, 4 is budget, 5, best practices, and the last one is recreation. Did those come about initially with the very first strategic plan? Is it something that those 6, how much have they changed since Farmington first set out to do a strategic plan?
Okay, a couple of things. First, I would consider the ones that you just read more of the town council goals, not my goals. They're really overarching goals. And they came out from the first survey and then the second survey of what kind of the priorities were overall of the goals. And how the history was is that the first plan came out and they said, what are the things that are important to the community and what when you're creating strategic plans. So transportation, traffic, land use, all very important high things. Education, we'll get back to that, but education was very important. A whole thing financial, budget, how we run a town and everything that goes along with that. Then there was the talk of, again, what was very important, kind of best practices in government and how that people, when they surveyed and how you run a government, that you should really be running a government like you're supposed to be running a government and doing best practices, which not all governments do. And so it was important that they do that. And also, it was important that came out that economic development needed to be an important component of what this plan was about. And the plan in general, though, a lot of it was about, a balance, about having transportation, open space, but also having good economic development. And this is kind of what the survey came. So all these goals came out. Recreation wasn't part of it. And then the council, over the course of, I think, 2 or 3 years, took each one of just those sentences and started to create layers underneath it. And that was desired outcomes and deliverables. And what was important and why the strategic plan is different from some other community strategic plans is that it was important for the staff and myself, because we always had goals before that. It was that it needed to be incorporated that this was more of a work plan, that the council and everyone understood that there's a lot of other things that are going on, and these are priorities of the council that are based on it. And that's when we started creating the goals in the right-hand column. And those goals have changed up throughout the whole time that the document. But some of them, like what I think may happen with some of these new goals, they start with a topic and then they keep on growing. And so it's not a static document. It may start with a committee that's charged to do this. And then the next time the goal is, it's a specific thing that it needs to do. And then it's another thing. And then later on, we had recreation was included. So recreation is a relatively new goal. And then the last part is education. And when we came up with education, there was a very large discussion and a lot of communication that education, it's not appropriate, that education is part of the town council's goals and objectives because they have by state law and some different things. And so there was a lot, we had an education committee and they talked a lot about what would be appropriate. And so what was finally decided upon is that the education goals would be included in the strategic plan. So the education has their own set of goals, and they're required by our goals, and required meaning they don't have to do it, but they do it because we work together. They submit their goals to us on an annual basis, and those goals are included. And the council, because back then, and I'm sure it's probably would be similar now, is that they were very, very did not want the council in the education goals, and that's why they wanted it as a separate, and we came up with a compromise position, and it's at least shown, but the council doesn't talk about the education goals.
Right, it's basically, it looks like a document that they have to produce for a meeting.
For
Department of
education, yeah.
So that they're regularly doing that.
Yeah.
So where I'm going with this is, and I'm not saying we address this now necessarily, but what stands out to me is that, or the question, is it time to kind of revisit the structure of the strategic plan, or at least start putting some things in place so that next time we're really looking at the whole plan, and I don't know, it looks like it's about every 2 years, that we make sure, whether it's through a new survey or some kind of communication with the community and input from town hall staff and the council to look and see if those goals are still fresh and still priorities, because now we're kind of carrying them over without that revisiting of the goals.
And I mean, again, my only real comment is that when we surveyed the community, what was it? I can't even, I'm losing track of time, the last time we did it.
2014.
We're in 2018. So in 2014, it affirmed the top goals. And that's, so again, they usually recommend, doing surveys every 10 years or so for best practices of that. But in 14, it was done. And that's what they said, the goals were the same, except for they felt that recreation was something that was missing in our goals, that should be up in the forefront. And it's not that recreation wasn't done, it was just that it felt it should be a priority of the goals. So again, the council could have a different document and things like that. My opinion is, and not that we couldn't make any kind of changes to it, is that it took probably 3 or 4 years of committees to put this document together. And to change it, again, I would say if you're looking at my charts, to make substantial changes to it, you're talking about reds, maybe not cost, except for time, but probably except for maybe surveys and things like that.
Okay.
And I think in 2014, when we did this, that is why the recreation goal came about. I mean, because we saw that there was a need through the survey that we did, which I would encourage us to do again at the time. And years ago, they said every 10 years is a good time to bring it forth and see if you're still touching on the places in the community or people and what they really think they need. And that's, when we did this, that was what we saw. So, anyway. And I do think, I can't stress enough, and I'm going to talk about it when we get to the education piece in here, how much the education, the people, Superintendent, Board of Education, how strongly they felt that we were not a part of the school's piece. We certainly know, and that's why the number one goal in ours became education, because we know how important it is to the town. But it was not at all something that the council was to get their hands into. It was something that the schools did. And the information, I mean, it's 11 pages of information that they give us, a lot of detail. And that's why it's in our goals, because the town that's how important it is. But it's the school's place to do that work, not ours. But certainly to take on the buildings and various things that we feel we need to help out with, so. Anyway, comments, questions for Kathy, or?
Just more of a comment, and this was something that I know multiple people here brought up at the last meeting, was just, the amount of committees we're already on, how much time we have to commit to quite a few additional committees that are proposed here, and just thinking of, is this kind of list of committees that we have right now too siloed, where we're really splitting things up into too small of a groups, where you have, I always hate, breaking things up into silos, where you potentially have these silos that aren't talking to each other, that are only focused on their goal. And I think we can just be more efficient and more agile in how we approach this and still achieve all the goals that we have listed here, because I think we have a really great list of goals here in this packet. So I guess since right now we're on goal number 2, the transportation and land, I'll kind of focus just on that with my comments. So desired outcomes 2.1, and I know Kathy, you didn't list this one as a committee on the other page, but just to make a comment on it, the historic properties committee, I think since we already have a Unionville Historic District Commission and a Farmington Historic District Commission, we could task those commissions with achieving the desired outcomes of this part of the goal. Next on 2.2, we have the Farmington Center Committee, and we were talking about at the last meeting the Parsons lot and how that's going to be coming up soon, and we'll have to make a decision as to what we end up doing with that, if we purchase that or if we don't purchase that. Just thinking about, I know further in we had a committee on facilities. Yep, that's 2.7. Yeah, page 8.
Goal 8.
Goal 8, yes. And I think Bruce had proposed another name for that, more encompassing name, an infrastructure committee. So I think that's actually a good idea to have that as an infrastructure committee. And I think you could roll in the Farmington Center Committee into an infrastructure committee. And I also think you could roll in a sidewalk committee into an infrastructure committee and have that one committee focus on those 3 things. Oh, and then the cemetery committee, page 6, goal 9. I think there was a little bit of discussion about this at the last meeting as well. And we already have an organization that deals with the cemetery, and they came to us with kind of the proposals that they have, and they're working with the state. I just don't think that we have to create a separate committee. I think we're just creating layer upon layer of too much bureaucracy. I think we can work with that group and have time on our agenda as the town council to, as new information comes forward, have them come back, have them share with us what new information they have, if something changed with their negotiations with the state, or if they found another piece of land that seems suitable. I think we can work with them and deal with that here in the town council without creating a separate committee. So for transportation and land, those are my comments.
Quick question for Ed. Sorry. What were the 3 committees that would be part of the infrastructure committee?
Facility, yep, sidewalk, and I was also proposing rolling the Farmington Center Committee into that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Edward. I appreciate those comments. In concept, I definitely agree that I think there's a lot of overlap between the committees that are being proposed. And I do think based on limited time, effort, the ability that we have to get work done, it's important to avoid as much overlap as possible, because especially if you have one group doing one thing and another group's impacting that, we want to make sure that they're not diverging from each other. On the comment regarding the historic properties, I agree that we don't need a separate committee for that. I would encourage us to consider that we incorporate some of the goal of preserving Farmington's historic roots into some of the other committees that are being proposed. So that way it can be, for example, Edward is proposing an infrastructure committee. My recommendation was going to be to ensure that a Farmington Center Committee was taking into account historic nature of Farmington and preserving the roots. And I think an infrastructure committee could easily also consider these issues. So I look at it's even, Kathy added it in blue in the goal at the top of the page, including the town's significant historic roots and charm, as that being an overarching goal for many committees within this goal too of transportation and land. And that way we can keep that in mind as we're moving other things forward. I I agree on the, unless there's a reason that I'm unaware of, I do believe the existing cemetery committee's been very active in reviewing land and proposing alternatives, and I think it might be a matter of encouraging them to create a concrete proposal for the town council to consider and move forward on, and instead of trying to create a separate committee to do that work. I don't have a good grasp, frankly, on the Farmington Center Committee and what its goals would be and its charge, and other than the Parsons acquisition. That's the one concrete item I'm aware of. So without knowing the full scope of that committee, it's hard for me to evaluate whether or not Farmington Center could be included in an infrastructure committee. It makes sense to me, but I don't know if that's putting too much on one committee or not. I definitely see the value in an infrastructure committee that considers facilities and sidewalks. And I would add that without a full assessment of town buildings, town facilities, and I'm even including in this fire department, police department buildings, I would have a very hard time voting on next year's budget to put in significant funds on any infrastructure improvements, because I would have a hard time evaluating the priority town-wide. So I think it's important that we have an idea of what priorities are town-wide, so fire, police, town hall, other town buildings, so that way we can evaluate our spending overall.
Okay? Yes.
Regarding the infrastructure committee, I had a similar thought as you did, Ed. I initially didn't have the center committee in there, not opposed to it, but I like the idea of, talking about facilities and sidewalks together and starting to overlap some of this. And like you had alluded to, Patty, depending on what exactly that center committee is going to entail, maybe that's a nice home for that as well, and certainly something to talk about. One thing I was going to bring up and hope we could talk about is, the schools are a big part of our infrastructure, and we're trying to catch up and put a lot into that infrastructure, is putting that as part of that infrastructure committee, our school buildings and mechanicals that need upgrades, roofs that need upgrades, just keeping up with what has to be done, like you alluded to, Patty, not just with the fire department, police department, but kind of one centralized, what I was thinking of, and I'm open to talk about, is a centralized committee, 3 or 5 members, that looks at a lot of the town, with then, call it 2 members that can focus on sidewalks, two members that can focus on education, so that it's not too overwhelming to this committee, obviously, but something I was hoping we could talk about, as part of that consolidation process.
Other comments? Yes.
Because we're on facilities, my initial thought around facilities was last week when we had the conversation, it became, I know a couple of us have brought up the need for, potential need for an overall assessment for townwide facilities, and then it kind of morphed into, that could be possibly a facilities committee, and I guess I wasn't thinking that that would necessarily be a need for a committee, at least right away, but I think what I'd really like to see, whether or not this comes out of a committee or gets done before a committee's formed and then a committee forms to work on this, would be something similar to the Fryer report that the Board of Education and the school district did, that analyzes, like you were saying, Paul, all of the infrastructure needs, whether it be roofs, locations, different modernization, electrical, plumbing. And so we have that to kind of complement the Fryer report on the school side, because I think the school is in a good place. I mean, that's a very recent report that was done. So I'd be looking for something like that to be done on a town level, kind of comparable to that, and that being the starting point for looking at facilities townwide. So that might be an area where we don't necessarily have to form a committee right away when we're looking at this time frame for implementing the strategic plan. My thought around the facilities issue.
Other comments?
CJ.
Kathy, currently in our capital spending, we got a number of years, and on those future years, we have buildings and infrastructure already put into that document. Where does that information come from?
We have quite a bit of facility studies that have been done over the years. We just did our fire station ones. We don't have one that is a comprehensive of all our buildings. You know, obviously, we'd have to budget for that. It would be, you know, expensive to do that, but it would probably be a valuable document. They'd probably take all the documents that we have and could merge them together. But, you know, we've just did one for the fire stations already. We have, you know, most of our other facilities, you know, we've been keeping up on what the plans are, roofs, you know, roofs, air conditioning, windows, you know, each building has their own plan. That's how we've run it for years and years and years, is that each building has their own plans and it's budgeted each year to keep up with that. And really the only times that the buildings have not been kept up with is when the council has not funded what was in the plans that we already had.
Okay, so it's my understanding on the Board of Education side, they never really had an in-depth study on all their buildings. So this Fryer report was somewhat new to them. They would come in with different issues when they came across them. We have currently looked into our buildings and the studies. We just don't have it in one single document.
I would say that's relatively fair, except that the Fryer study is definitely more
Yes.
extensive.
Yes.
Definitely more
Clearly.
extensive than
Okay.
what we have on our buildings.
As far as the, we were talking about putting things into another committee, the Farmington Center Committee, Goal 2 here, which is red across the top, I don't think there's any way we can put that one realistically into another committee. I think that is a standalone. Hopefully it's not too many year standalone, but that's a pretty key committee there that is going to open up, that's going to be our entranceway into town. That's going to be what everyone sees when they first come into town. I think that truly needs to be a standalone of all these different committees we're talking about. I think that's one of our most critical. And at the beginning, when we're discussing what the finances are of it and what the state is looking to get for that piece of property, the key to me is that we want to drive anything that goes in that old Parsons Center. If we don't do this committee properly, the gateway, as we were calling it with our last committee, is lost. We need to be controlling that, so this is critical. I think that, there's no question in my mind that that needs to be kept as a very separate committee. As far as the historic, a few different people have already mentioned, I would agree. We have a Farmington Historic Committee, we have the TP&Z. I would like to see them continue to focus on, as it says in blue, including the town's significant historic roots and charm, but I don't know that that needs to be a new separate committee. It might be something we could monitor more, whether we have the liaison for the Farmington Historic Committee come in and just give detailed reports, as he is currently doing. But keep us updated and see if there are any gaps that we do need to fill. It's something to keep in mind, so for the future we can look into that. So those are two of the biggest ones that I'm looking at. So the, of course, the goal number 5, would love to see that yellow $ sign go to a bright red one, but that's not realistic. That's the bicycle committee. I happen to chair the bicycle advisory committee, so I'm a little biased. But I would like to see some type of actual goals, and one of the goals I would propose under that, which should not really change that yellow $ sign, would be committing to having at least 3 streets more this year labeled, whether it is through Sharrows, signage, or something, but have some type of visibility on these roads to let cars know that bicycles are riding on these roads. They have access to these roads, and whether it's the 3 feet to pass, whether it's to share the road is sort of not looked upon well, but have some type of signage and commit to 3 roads in town. We're really looking to our east-west access that will connect us to our trails, which are north-south. That's all I have right now.
Madam Chair. I'm just going to point out a couple things, just the infrastructure committee. I like the concept of putting some of these other committees together. I guess I would like to hear from the town manager. It sounds pretty big on what that is. I think before we go down that response, but I agree with CJ about the Farmington Center. That should be separate because that's pretty significant. Also, depending on what comes out of the charge, it could be done like within a couple years, whatever the situation is. Just touching on number one here, the historic property. I don't disagree that we do have the Unionville Historic Commission and the Farmington Historic Commission. The one concern that I have is they're only privy to the properties that are in that commission. So there's a lot of significant buildings in our community that are not protected from that commission. So I just want to highlight that, you know, I'm happy that the overall comment underneath transportation and land includes town's significant historic routes. I just don't want us to forget about that because those properties are lost for someone in terms of being protected from those commissions. Planning and zoning, really they'll do what they can do, but if the zoning regulations allow them to tear down that house, they can tear down that house. So I just want to highlight that. I think that's it for me.
And yes.
I have a question. I follows up on CJ's comments. Two questions, actually. One, Kathy, you mentioned that, and you've said it several times between budget season and now, that you do have all of these reports on town buildings. The fire reports were available online to the public. Is there any mechanism of making town facility reports available? I think it supports when we make decisions on spending money or doing things. I think having these types of assessments available to the public supports any decisions we make and also helps inform our decisions along that process.
I know definitely we can put some of them on and see where we are. And again, like I said, some of our reports aren't that extensive. I mean, they're not extensive like the fire report, and part of it's part of just the capital, but I mean, like the fire department one was just recently done. So obviously that could go on. That the police department, again, it's not that complex with what the planning is for it. You know, you have the roof, we know it was repaired in 20 years, so it's on the plan for 20 years later. The windows, the air conditioning system, so that type of stuff. I could probably get online and put some of that stuff on, but because I think I understand what you're saying, but again, it's just a question of taking the time and getting all the plans, putting them all together, putting them into a system that I think is easy, that people can read, and that it's on the webpage. So again, the ones that I can definitely put my hands on quickly, I can get them online right away.
Okay, yeah, I do think that's a good first step. I do agree with comments Beth made about making sure that we have these types of information available. It does make it easier to prioritize what we need to do and what we need to spend. Second, CJ, I'm good with your 3 streets. I think, you know, and I like it's a measurable goal. My daughters are taught all about making measurable goals. That's a nice measurable goal. I do, if it's okay, Madam Chair, I do have a question for CJ. One of the items added to his, what was it, goal 5? Is that where you are, CJ? Yeah.
Yes.
One of the proposed modifications to the committee charge is to review walkability and bicycle connectivity in town.
Yes.
I think walkability is key, and I'm a big proponent of walkability. I was just wondering, as the chair of the bicycle committee, if you think the bicycle committee is going to be really focused on bicycle connectivity or bicycle connectivity and walkability, because they're not quite the same.
No, they're not. the walkability is probably a little easier. So if it's any type of connectivity that the bicycles would traverse, I think it would surely be accessible to the walkability, and I will bring that up when we're discussing it. What we've looked at is targeting different roads that, again, mainly the east-west access, but also destination roads, getting people to Unionville Town Center from wherever they are in town. The trail is the biggest place people want to get to, whether they're walking or riding. So I think that fits right in. I think that's very good.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Yes.
Are you going to make an amendment to include your
I would like to
idea?
do that.
Okay.
I didn't know if we were making
Well,
amendments at this point, or...
We're still discussing.
Yeah, but we need to do that once we get,
Yes.
if we're going to be changing things.
And I'd like to add one thing to something Bruce said. He was talking about with the historic commissions, and it's a good point to, I think, emphasize. The Unionville Historic Commission and the Farmington Historic Commission are actually only looking at small parts of town, the town areas that are part of that historic district. So to somehow open up and look at buildings that are not within that district would be nice. I don't know whether we could do it through those two commissions where they could refer back to us to areas they'd like to target, but I believe to become part of one of the historic districts, you have to accept becoming part of the historic district. And I don't know whether we can look at spot areas. We may already be doing that somewhat, but that's a good point you made.
And I would think, well, any other comments before? Go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, sure, just to follow up on a few things that other comments people made. So I'm definitely on board, CJ, with your proposal for the signage for the three streets for bicycle. Definitely on board with that. And then with the comments, Bruce, I'm glad you brought that up about the Historic Properties Committee. That brings up another question to me is how do we define historic properties throughout town that aren't just in that commission? Do we have a definition for that yet, or is that something that this committee or those other two committees, if we expand the charge of those committees to encompass this new goal, would be tasked with handling? And then in regards to the Farmington Center Committee, I'm not opposed to having that as a separate committee. I do understand it's important, although I think it kind of brings us back to the question that I think it was Patty asked as to what is the charge of the committee. Is it just the Parsons acquisition? Kind of what is that /other? Like what would be in that other? Or is it truly really the Parsons acquisition is 99% of what they'd be looking at? So those are my comments.
The Historic Commissions, is that something that we can, I'm on board with letting the Farmington Unionville Historic Commissions take on that discussion of how can we further the historic properties being safeguarded, I guess is a word I'll use, but looking into that. And I'd like to have them have that chance to do that, whether it's a change in their charge. We have liaisons to both of those committees, so I think we can certainly keep abreast of it and also give our input into that. And as far as how they go about defining that, I'm not sure specifically, other than if we let them have a discussion about how to do it. And I don't know, Kathy, if that's something we could just allow them to do and come up with some things and come back to the council with some thoughts, or rather than having any committees do it right now for the town. The 3 more streets, I think that's a great definable goal. The Center Committee, I think that it needs to be a standalone. I think that for this time, I think that somehow, and I'm going to look to Kathy to give us guidance on this, but she said, as far as the infrastructure is concerned, we have a report already on the fire station. So I don't want to reinvent any wheel or make more work. What I'm wondering is it possible, and I wouldn't put this as a top priority right now when we go and look at, and we decide on what are the top priorities, then we'll have to talk about that. But maybe there's a possibility just to put together at some point some of the pieces of our infrastructure and what the needs may be for the future. I think we're very fortunate that we haven't had to really get into a lot of detail with it, because in the budgets, they always bring us that information. whatever needs to be addressed immediately, whatever, it's not even a situation that in my experience, that something was overlooked. I mean, the things in the buildings we have, they continually bring to us, it's how much we decide to put into them. So, but maybe over time, we can look at putting some of that together, so we have a committee that then knows where they want to go for infrastructure, to look at other things. But I don't see that we need to do a full-fledged report like the Friday. I think we've already got the information. So, but I do think the center committee, as far as the charge of it, I don't think we've defined it yet. We know that the Parsons is in my opinion, you can all, but if the Parsons acquisition, that's going to be the main priority. But there's also the pieces of beautification. What else do we want to do there? We want to be able to guide this somehow. And how are we going to do that? I'm not really sure. But I think that's a conversation we need to have about what's going to be as we come in. CJ?
And along with that, Nancy, I think until we get through that initial step of negotiating with the state and we get the town to agree we would like to acquire that property, there's really nothing much we can do. I think the next steps, hopefully the town understands the importance of us driving this project as a town Farmington, and then we would look at things like the beautification, trying to find developers who will develop it in a way that we like. We had a number of meetings with the Gateway project, a lot of charrettes throughout time that had some great ideas, trying to put them together and see if we can actually make this entrance to Farmington, this nice, beautiful new entrance. But until we get past that stage of negotiating with the state, getting the town to see the importance of that, wanting to buy that property, I don't think there's much else we can do, so we can't really create much more of a charge as far as I would think.
I think that's going to kind of be a process that's going to evolve as we move forward with that. And the cemetery committee, I really appreciate the comments about that. I think right now we leave that alone and let the cemetery committee come to us and present. We're working with them, and the town's working with them. We have our people from the town working to kind of talk about that, and we've been, so I think I don't think we need a separate committee right now to look at that. But just keep it, it certainly is on our radar, because that's going to come up sooner than later to actually address by council. And I guess that was it. What we'll have to, Kathy, do you have just a comment on how to talk about or address, and I'm not saying as a first priority at all, but how to, the infrastructure piece. We do have it specifically in our charge to begin with. So.
Well, again, as I'm hearing you guys speak, and some of the things, Beth, that you said from the very beginning about the strategic planning and stuff, is that it kind of reminds me of just kind of going full circle about things, and that a lot of these things that you're talking about are really topics that, that you don't know what the charge is on a lot of these different things. I kind of like the infrastructure one that you talked about that looks at the facilities, the infrastructure, the sidewalks, and everything like that. But that's a huge kind of, people need more information on this, what we have. And I remember going back when we did the strategic plan, I would say, we have this information, but maybe it's not codified the way that you want it to be shown. But that's why the strategic plan took years to kind of get it together, to codify what the information is. A lot of these big goals it's like a planning process. And this document and these goals are big goals that are a lot of different things. And we don't know what the charge is. And so, I like the idea of, I don't think the center committee, I think that has to be a standalone. But infrastructure that could talk about sidewalks. But I don't even know what the charge would be. It would be setting up just an ad hoc to come up with what the charge would be. And I guess my point is that when you're doing these kinds of ad hoc and coming up with the charges and what we're going to do, what are our metrics, what are we going to try to come up with at the end, I think I just caution everyone is that usually when you're doing strategic planning, that is the goal. Like, you really are going through this and doing what you said. We're figuring out what the infrastructure goal is going to be. We're figuring out what the Farmington with the center is. So we got to, do that. even the cemetery, which you say, and I agree, that's a huge policy decision. A lot of that legwork is done, and that's not something that the cemetery committee, you guys, my experience is, that's a huge thing about what land you want to use and not, and all the legwork is. So again, going full circle though, is something like what you guys are saying and what's in this document and what can be accomplished with the staffing when you have two Farmington High School committees going, your regular ad hoc committees going on, and just, again, I think Farmington Center, the Parsons part is one part where it's a tangible goal where you're deciding what you're going to do. But there's a lot that goes with that, meaning that there's the green with the Stanley Whitman. What do the people want to do with the green? How is the beautification going to look? How are we going to work that? It's a working group with a lot of different things. So I like the idea of maybe making an infrastructure one, but I am concerned about just coming up with these charges and working with these committees is a huge amount of work. It's to come up with that. You know, that's why we took each one of these goals separately and we did them each at a time. When we did this the first time around, we took one, transportation and land, and that committee met, and it took 10 months for them to come back with what they needed. Then we took the next one. And I'm telling you, that infrastructure thing that you've just talked about, just to get information and just to codify what you want to do is it's a lot of stuff. There's, you know, what we do with sidewalks, it's what we do with infrastructure. Do we have facility plans? How do we show it? How do we codify all the information so you guys know what information I have? How do we do all that and put it all together? It's a lot of different things with Farmington High School with two committees that we're running to make sure that that's going, and a Farmington Center committee.
Go ahead.
With that in mind, I think where we have our goal 8 here for creating an ad hoc facility committee, keeping in mind how much we have, and there are a number of big items we're looking at, maybe and this is for discussion, maybe a better goal there would be make current building assessments available to town council and public, because that's something we currently have. If whether I think Patty was bringing up putting it on the website, Beth was asking about getting it out to everyone. If we had that information available to us, we would actually see what currently exists, and that would give us some idea what we might want going forward, but that would be a good first step, just making that available. And I wouldn't think that would be bright reds across the top. Hopefully that would be closer to the greens, just making current information available.
I mean, it would be green for the town council. It would be red for the staff.
So just getting what you currently have and making it available.
It's all, I mean, again, like, it depends. I'd have to really look at it. We have facility plans, we have, equipment replacement plans, we have, budget plans, but it's not really codified in a document that's like a Friar type of document. We have like the police department, like here for the town hall, for instance, we're at the end of it because we had a 10-year plan and we're finishing up with the parking lot outside. So it was a 10-year plan, and now we start, and it's probably, again, I'd have to look at it to see, but the information is there. It's probably not in the way that you guys are talking about. We could get it in that way.
Well, maybe that's the beginning. I mean, not even to get it that way all, Kathy, right now, but just to have an idea of,
But
Go ahead.
I guess though my point is that I like the whole idea of it where you guys could have a small little group that actually says what are the things that you want are the most important. Do you want that, or do you want to look at the sidewalks, or do you want to do this? And then you guys have all the information, and then the committee can say, this is what I want you to be spending your time on, and to the staff, I want you to put all that together because that's what we really think is the first step. I think that's why I want these little committees, because I think that there's a lot that people don't have information on. We have it, we don't have it.
Bruce?
Yeah. I don't want to steal CJ. Listening to these small committees that you think that is worth having, but I just want to throw this out there. So if we did have an infrastructure committee, and as part of their first charge, as CJ has recommended, just give us what you have. So we can make that assessment. And then as this document is fluid, as we've been talking about, then once that has been checked off, maybe that's their first priority, then maybe we give them another 2 priorities for them to focus on, so it's the same committee, same people constantly working or looking at it. I'm throwing that out there. I don't know if that would help to get us where you think that we should get.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just think that if we have kind of a working plan, then the staff knows what's coming, what we know we're supposed to be doing. And if that's it and say, okay, well, we want to do that, but we're also talking about sidewalks and the group can talk about it. And because again, I don't think you all really know totally what the charge is. And so it's hard for me to figure out where we're going and what people should be spending their time on until we kind of vet the ideas. And we could vet them, again, but kind of cherry picking one thing after another. I'd rather have the whole topic looked at and then saying, these are the things that I want to look at, and then we can put some stuff together, and then I can give you an overall picture of what the time is and what goes with it.
Go ahead.
Okay, so to try and narrow this down a bit more, so to create a committee that would review what documents we would like assembled as a first step towards an overarching facilities document. Something like that makes sense, Kevin? That is a doable, if our committee is trying to figure out what documents we'd be asking for, not even getting the documents at that point, just figuring out what areas we want to target.
Yeah, I know again, I'm not trying to be difficult. I know what you're trying to do, but I can do that. I'm really looking for the committee more of just if we're talking about overall infrastructure. And so what you've basically, we're having the discussion, you've talked about for all that infrastructure, that priority is getting those documents. And if that's what we think is the first step, that's fine. That's a good goal. It's a tangible goal. We can do that. But you guys didn't talk as a group about any of these other things. So the sidewalks are going away, and that's a good priority. This is going away, that's going away.
You just shocked Bruce when you said that. I was going to mention before, no one mentioned sidewalks.
Yeah, so no, the only reason why I'm saying it's not going away in my vision is that it would be part of this committee, but it may not be prioritized as the number 1. So the first goal within that committee is to come back with the documents, or maybe even come back with an inventory of what we asked them for. We want them to look at, and again, you mentioned sidewalks, the buildings, I don't know what else we said that would go in there, but whatever would be inclusive in this infrastructure committee, we would prioritize that charge to say, okay, here's the first, we think that you guys should be able to accomplish the first 3 items. And this is what it is. And maybe one of those items are sidewalks.
I agree. But
Okay.
but I think though that's where you have the goal that says create an ad hoc committee on infrastructure. That's the goal. Then on one of the next council agendas, there's 2 council people. That's the only thing in the charge is that. The committee goes and we have the discussion like you just said, and we vet it. And then it comes back to the council and it says, we've decided that the charge that should be in this goal is that you're going to look at facility reports, and we're going to do that first. And then after that, we're going to look at sidewalks, and after that. So we have a plan so that we're not going
Right.
this along. And so I think we're on the same page that that's the committee, and it goes back and then it comes back to the council with kind of what the overall charge is going to be and some metrics of what you want to accomplish that you're sending us to do.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if Steve.
We just haven't said it in a way that we could actually put it forth.
I don't know how everyone else feels, but.
So creating an ad hoc committee to review what a larger infrastructure committee would focus on?
Yeah, and we've done this before. It's like when we have you have a committee to study what you're going to actually do.
Okay.
So it's to create. I would think it's to create an ad hoc infrastructure committee to review. What did you just say?
To determine what areas a infrastructure committee would focus on.
Yeah.
Period.
I move that right now
Period.
before I forget.
You want to make
Period.
an amendment? What is the amendment going to
Let's,
I was hoping you were listening.
be? I was. You're
Write
still
it down.
discussing it.
Yes, I know. To create an ad hoc committee to determine what areas a future infrastructure committee would focus on.
And this is going to replace
Period.
goal 8.
Yes.
Correct.
And
And,
the sidewalk committee.
right.
The separate
Yeah, that would also,
standalone
yes, the sidewalk committee would fall under that same purview,
Yes.
but it's
Which
under
the-
infrastructure, so
I'm
it's not going away.
6.
Eliminate goal.
6.
And to eliminate goal 6.
Yes.
Yes.
So you're, yes.
so CJ was to create an ad hoc committee to
Determine
determine what a future infrastructure committee will
Focus on.
focus on. That's the goal.
Like it. Second.
And to eliminate goal 6.
And eliminate goals.
Yes.
Yes. And just, I think that the first step in this is seeing where we are to begin with. So I think all that we talked about, first we need to see where we are before we go anywhere. We can't move forward unless we know where we're at. And so that would be the piece of it. And don't forget, we're going to prioritize these when we get to the end. Okay? Now, I think we also.
You need a second.
I second
He
it.
did. Oh, we need to vote on that first. Okay. So any other discussion about
This
this
is voting on
amendment?
the amendment.
Yes, correct. Yes.
I have a comment, and before I move to amend it, to move to amend CJ's amendment, my comment is whether we should add something, again, this is the lawyer speaking, infrastructure may include, but isn't limited to sidewalks, facilities. I don't know if there's anything else we were considering, but that way it's clear that it's including the sidewalks that we're eliminating. I don't know.
I would be amenable to that. I would second
Including
it.
but not limited to.
Why don't we make it a friendly amendment and to, let's see, future infrastructure will focus on including sidewalks?
May include, but is not limited to.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
important to put that in though.
Yep.
Including but not.
Yeah.
May include, but not limited to sidewalks.
And
Yeah.
facilities,
And facilities.
period. So it's open to many other things that may come down the pike, but it's not limited, and if sidewalks isn't a priority to begin with, then it's not.
Right.
That's something else. But the committee has that charge.
Do we have to second it? or-
We did.
No,
No.
we just made it a friendly amendment, so we're just sliding it right in there.
So we're all good. Okay, any other discussion on this?
You're going to read it back?
Sure.
Oh.
Did you say you want to read it?
Please read it back.
To create an ad hoc committee to determine, let's see.
Determine what a future
What a future infrastructure
committee
will focus on, including but not limited to sidewalks and facilities, and to eliminate goal 6.
Yes.
Okay, that's what we have on the table. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, now I'm going to go out on a limb and ask for, if we're, goal number 1, if we are all in agreement to eliminate that and allow the Unionville and Farmington Historic Commissions to take on that role, and specifically through our liaisons here in the discussions we've had about what kinds of things can we do. So we would eliminate goal 1.
Are we having discussion?
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
I
do
asked
we-
if that was going to be.
Move to eliminate goal 1.
Okay.
Before we have our discussions, we have to move in
Thank
second.
you.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I think I'm fine with that. I just wanted to just throw something out there in terms of, we have a Farmington Historic Society. How do we get them engaged with the Farmington Historic Commission?
I think you need to understand that the Farmington Historic Commission runs on state statute. it's not just a willy-nilly committee. It's guided by state statute, and it's limited in what it can do. The Farmington Historic Commission is not a town commission. There are people you can approach if you want to, but you don't appoint them, you don't run them, you know.
You mean the commission?
Yeah, the commission, not the commission,
No,
the
the
authority.
society.
Society is just a group of people. It's not a town committee.
It's a separate individual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I understand the role of the Historic Commission. I think the purpose of me bringing up the Historic Society is how do we, maybe we...
You certainly could make an overture to that.
Right. Just because they have more knowledge
Oh, yeah.
significantly on those historic pieces of property. We're all living and breathing that brown house that potentially could be torn down. I know that you're working with the owner of doing that, and that's a piece of property that has a great deal of history in this community, but it wasn't protected from the Farmington Historic District because, as CJ had pointed out, that business or the owner, not necessarily the business owner, but the owner of that property has to opt it in. So as Paula had outlined, that the Farmington Historic Commission, they're charged with certain things. And I know currently as their liaison, they're working to try to get other people into this commission, into the district. But there's some challenges with that. So obviously they're going to probably need maybe some funding to help do that because they have to put stuff together. I don't know what they have in their budget today, but I'm just throwing that out there because I would like to try, if possible, how do we get the Historic Society kind of more engaged and maybe...
Maybe that would be something that you could maybe have something that we put in the town planner's goals, that something along the lines that says that's something that says to hold a joint meeting between the leadership of the Historic Commission and the historic properties to come up with some joint objectives or something, and have that in the planner's goals, something along those lines.
That's a great idea.
I think I like that too. I just don't want us to forget about that because, as Paula had said, that the commission has a certain charge, and they definitely do a good job in trying to manage that. But I just think that there's certain things that the Historic Society could bring to the table, and we should tap into it.
And I think we've had up like with our 820 group and stuff like that. I think that we're starting to build some relationships there. So maybe we could, if you just eliminated this and then said something that, in the town planner's goal, that we have some kind of engagement between the Historic Society and the Historic Commission.
So, let me say
Plural.
at Unionville and Farmington commissions. And I think too, it has come a long way even in the last couple of years, that they're really talking a lot. And we also have the town historian in the Farmington Society.
Yeah.
So historical, so I think all of that together could be really, there's a wealth of knowledge there that could really be, they could work together and bring about good things. That coordination would be great.
So are we amending this?
We're taking
or
it out.
Taking it out, but adding something else,
No.
or no?
She's going to put it, Kathy, our town manager, will put it, it'll be part of the planner's goal, because she
Got it.
does
Okay.
all the different, the planner's goals, the engineer, all of that. Right, Kathy? And you'll
Yeah.
talk about that as far.
Just so, I would do something along the lines of that you would, a motion to eliminate goal number 1 with the understanding that the town planner will be creating a goal that will have, Bruce, what you said, planner's goal, that there will be between the Historic Society, the Historic Commissions, you use the word.
Conversation.
That engage in a, what are we looking for, a joint meeting or?
Partnership?
A partnership, yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it just sounds like one meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One and done.
yeah,
We're looking for a longer term.
yeah.
So, do we have, go ahead.
Question.
Sure.
I'm not familiar with the state statutes regarding historic commissions, is there anything that we're proposing right now that would contravene the statute that creates the Historic District Commission?
I see it as a collaboration,
Okay.
which I don't
That's a
think
good word.
could infringe on anything, a collaboration between the two.
I think, again, we're going back to we don't know what it's going to be.
Right.
So it's the same thing, so it'd be to work with the town planner, to work with the Historic Society, the Historic Commissions, and the town historian on various ways to collaborate on mutual interest, on
Mutual
historic
interest,
interest.
sure.
Collaborate,
We're ultimately furthering their goals.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
yeah, right.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the state statute for the Historic Commission is to really try to protect those historic houses. And one way for them to help do that is them getting educated by the Historic Society as much as they can, so.
Yeah, I think something similar to that would work.
Any other comments, questions? So do we actually have a goal? I mean, have a motion to eliminate what you just said, Kathy?
I think we have to amend it, no?
The motion is to eliminate goal 1 with the understanding
Oh, okay.
that the town manager will charge the town planner to get the Historic Commission, the Historic Society, and the town historian to collaborate on mutual goals.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Second?
Second.
Oh, we need,
Oh.
okay, whoever first. Okay. Any conversation, any more discussion about that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. Okay. Let's move on to number 5.
Wait, can we?
Oh,
I was
sorry.
just going to say, if we just go quickly on goal 2 for Farmington Center, I think I heard from most people that we want to keep that as an individual
Standalone.
goal. And I think that could be the goal could be to appoint a Farmington Center committee. And then I think we're working in June to kind of come up with a real basic charge for them in June. So I think the goal should probably just be to appoint a Farmington Center committee as soon as possible.
That's good.
Okay. Now we're going to continue on to 5. I think, CJ?
Yes, I would like to an amendment to number 5 that says, let's see, we've got support, just add to that, that we will commit to signage on a minimum of 3 roads throughout town. Signage including sharrows or physical signs.
Second?
Discussion.
Commit to signage, and then,
On a minimum of 3 roads throughout town.
did you want to include something about what that signage is? Could you sort of?
Signage, yeah, I said signage including physical signs or sharrows.
So, just so I can get some clarity though, so this part now in blue, existing goal recommends modifying it to that. That is what you're gonna do when you guys do your charge. So the
Yes.
goal is still number 5, but we're gonna add in here,
Adding.
provide needed support to the bicycle committee before it receives the appropriate staff and injections, and will commit to 3 additional signs on town roads.
No, 3 additional
No.
rows.
Signage on 3 additional roads
That's what I
throughout
meant.
town.
3, including physical and/or sharrows.
I think you were trying to pull a fast one on me.
And that would be the goal.
Yes.
So we're clear on that, so the blue goes away, and then the amendment is what we just said. I said it backwards, but that's what I meant.
Thank you.
So the blue
Okay.
goes away.
Yes.
Want the blue to go away, okay.
Okay, and we have a second, and any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. 6 we already took care of. I think we're good. We're good, we did 8, right?
Yep.
And how do you want to deal with cemetery committee?
Well, how about, instead of appointing an ad hoc committee,
Yeah.
why not we write,
Continue to work
how
with-
about to present a report to the town council on the findings of the findings of the cemetery committee? You know, we have the whole report. It's now, so something along to work with, to identify town land that would be suitable for the expansion and present a report to the town council.
current update report to the town?
Yeah, a current, yeah.
Because it's not going to be a report of what we are doing. It will be a report of options
Yeah, and
Because those have
present,
changed.
through the time,
We're seeing what the current options
yes.
are.
yeah.
So it'll be options that have, just say options.
What do you want it to be?
So it would be,
You're going to eliminate what's there.
Appoint an ad hoc committee, yep.
so it would be
Rid
to
of that.
work with the Farmington Committee and the Farmington, and I'd get rid of the legislative delegation, to work with the Farmington Committee to identify town land that would be suitable, to identify land, not town land, land that would be suitable for the expansion of the Riverside Cemetery, and report options, and present a report including options to the town council.
Yeah.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion about that one? Good. All right. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. How about page 7, number 11, excuse me. We're good, right?
I have a
Oh,
question
go
on
ahead.
10, actually.
Oh,
Kind of a general question. So that refers to the yearly report on Sub-Edge Farm at Fisher Farm. Are there other farms in town that are handled the same way?
No.
That we- okay.
that's the only one.
Because this is
We own
a
it.
much larger farm, and so the council had asked that they just see a yearly report on what's going on. Yep.
Okay, 11 we're all set with. And that's it. So,
If we don't want to-
yep. Go ahead.
Okay. Madam Chair, I move to approve goal 2, pages 1 through 7 as amended.
Second.
No, you already did it. The amendments are just part of the.
Oh, okay.
So it's
have
just
to
to
vote.
approve the
So
goal.
just to approve the goal.
Yeah,
Okay.
As presented?
Well, as amended, whatever. You just,
I just said that.
yeah, I know, you just vote. The motion, you made
You
that.
already made the
Oh,
motion.
I already made the motion?
That was the
Okay.
first thing you did a long time ago.
That was a lot.
Okay,
So we did the
it was a
amendment,
long
now we're
time
coming
ago.
back to the original motion.
Yeah.
So now we're back to the original motion of approving goal number 2, correct?
Yes.
Paula? Right.
Yes, yes.
Okay, just making sure. Okay, so any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, goal 3. There we go.
I move to approve goal 3, pages 8 through 9.
Second.
Okay.
As you can see on that, I added on the deliverables. I think you already saw that. That's not new from the last time. That was to attract the housing quality. So goal 12 is basically the Yukon Committee, which is a green, and I'm recommending no other changes on that.
Any questions? Go ahead, Beth.
Can we just talk about, or can you give us a synopsis of what the Yukon Subcommittee is? I
Yep.
know that in our boards and commissions booklet, we have several that may or may not, some may not be active right
Right,
now.
yep.
So this one is referring to,
This is basically, we have 2 Yukon subcommittees. One is not active, but it may be becoming active again because of some of the changes up at the hospital. But this one is referring to that the council meets now only on twice a year, the subcommittee, just to keep up to speed about various things that are going on at Yukon. Just if, when all the work was being done at the health center, we were meeting more often because we were interested about what was going on. There were a lot of traffic concerns and various things. So items of various of interest. When something comes up, if what they're doing up there, different projects. And right now, we're just meeting on twice a year, just to keep us up to speed about what's going. The other committee, which has been not meeting for a while, has to do with the floor 5, which is on the Yukon Health Center. They have prisoners that stay on the floor, and right now there's been a change of how that's managed between the corrections and the Yukon Health, and we've been in touch, and our police department is going to be involved in what that committee is going to be and whether it's going to need to be a council committee or not.
so So the other one's just a general Yukon subcommittee?
Yes.
Doesn't really have much.
This one's a general Yukon subcommittee. The other one is directly related to 4-5.
And the committee really took care of, as the projects were unfolding, the additions, and there were things that affected the community. For instance, the lights went to a neighborhood that, wasn't a good, so we discussed that, and how can we, or the traffic. How was that going to be helped? And so those were things that just were ongoing with UConn and us. So now they're not. We've taken care of those. So. Anything else? Okay. All those in favor of goal 3, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Okay, I move to approve goal number 4, pages 10 through 11.
Second.
Okay, Kathy and
I think we went through it in detail last time. I don't have really any changes from what we talked about last time.
any questions for Kathy?
Madam
Yes.
Chair. Having just gone through my first full budget process, I realize there's a lot of questions, and it's a steep learning curve for those of us sitting on town council. I also think that there's a lot of information that the public doesn't have as part of the budget process, that they don't, it's not as transparent as it could be, and I know we're getting into a transparency committee as part of something else later on. But one proposal I have, and I'd be interested to hear from Kathy and Joe because I see he's here, is one potential goal being to strive towards, and I'm unfortunately woefully not as knowledgeable as I should be, awards towards GFOA standards for budgeting practices. I know that awards exist, and perhaps a goal could be to strive to obtain an award for our budgeting process. I don't know if budgeting process is the right phrase or something else.
And I think this is another one where we talk about the ad hoc committee, again, general terms like we did for infrastructure, because again, there is definitely a GFOA type of award. It's my understanding, is that me? There's a lot to it, and again, it's something that we could strive to, but I'd rather have the council look at communication transparency as a whole to decide which items you think would be the most important, sort of what Bruce was saying before, that they come up and say, this is the budget document, this is what we'd like to do, this is what we want to aim for, that you all and I have more information about what it really takes to get to be GFOA and have the budget. And if that's a higher priority, then maybe something else that you want to have done, and we work it that way. That's just a suggestion, because I don't know enough to say how much it would be to change that budget document to do that. You know, what it would take in the staff work. We haven't researched it, we haven't looked at it, and again, I don't know what we want to do with this ad hoc one. And again, if there's nothing else in that ad hoc committee that you're interested in doing, then sure, we could come back and say, this is what it would take to become GFOA. That would be fine. But again, I'm not sure if you have the finance director doing other tasks as we move on later in this budget in the strategic plan.
So it's, just to make sure I understand,
Yeah.
Kathy, your suggestion is that instead of including the GFOA here in goal 4, that it be something that be considered as part of the transparency and communication ad hoc that's, unfortunately, I don't know what page, but
Yes.
later on.
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting.
Okay. Anything else to add?
I'd actually like to make an amendment. I'd like to move an amendment for goal 17. Yep.
Okay?
So where it says, continue to meet with Farmington's delegation on a yearly basis to explore ways to decrease reliance on local property taxes. And I'd like to add to that, such as, but not limited to, cost sharing with other municipalities, because we're already doing that to a degree, and I think giving them some direction that they should look into that, other opportunities for cost sharing with other municipalities as part of their charge.
Limited to.
Such as, but not limited to, cost sharing with other municipalities.
Second.
So you're saying that the Farmington delegation looked to do that?
Well, it says state officials as well, so I'm not sure exactly what.
Yeah, but
Who
you're,
would
Just continue to meet with Farmington's delegation on a yearly basis. So you mean Farmington's delegation is who you're talking about? Looking into more cost sharing, right?
Right, yeah, collaborating with the delegation, yep.
Comments, questions?
Looks like a good suggestion.
Second.
Did you have a question? Oh, go ahead.
If Kathy had examples of where we're already doing this, and maybe where you've looked into it, but maybe just weren't quite there yet, or where you could use assistance.
Well, I mean, I think that, again, we are constantly with our CROGs, with our Farmington Valley Health, looking at different ways to collaborate with other municipalities. And sometimes that the legislative people, they offer different kinds of incentives to help to collaborate. For instance, we dispatch for the town of Burlington, because that was a collaboration that, and the state legislative group offered incentives to do that. So these are different things that constantly with CROG and how we do, to collaborate. We're part of a Farmington Health District, regional health district, and we collaborate with all the towns, and we're all part of one health district. But a lot of times what happens is that Farmington most times does not want to lose their level of service by collaborating. And so it does a lot sometimes with incentives and different things. And so we always try to have dialogue with just the state groups that are there different incentives that would help, and what can we do to collaborate more with some of the different communities.
Okay, thank you for that. So that's not really just meeting with Farmington's delegation, but it really is about collaborating with these other agencies and other municipalities. So I'm looking at the language under desired outcomes, which covers elected federal and state officials. But maybe it needs to be expanded because, for instance, when you talk about the health district and that's not necessarily coming out of the delegation.
No, but they're doing that. It's already being done.
Right, I just wanted to incorporate everything that is being done into the goal. If it needs to be a wider discussion other than outside the delegation when we're looking at cost sharing.
I thought there was something in here, and I can't put my finger on it, that talked about community, bringing in the community, but I don't know.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Should we be voting on Edward's motion before we talk about other changes to the goal?
Well, I didn't know if she was
Okay. Right.
saying something that would change the support for Edwards if it needed to be expanded.
Okay.
So that's why I was
Thank you.
kind of holding off.
I mean, I guess there's two things, Edward. If you are looking that we continue, which we do, but to have it stated here so it's more specific, that we continue to work with our state group to help with different ideas that we can do, such as with working with other municipalities, regionalization and things like that. I think that's part of this goal. If we're talking about, you want a separate goal that really says that we always are somewhat doing that, but if that's going to be a new priority and a goal, that I think that's a whole other thing.
That's what I meant. But I don't know what it would be. Thoughts? Yeah, I think this is specifically about Farmington's delegation, so I guess personally, but I wanted to. Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor right now. Any more discussion on that? Or Edward?
I just want to clarify that you mentioned regionalization, and I wouldn't really include that in the I would call it cost sharing.
Okay, yeah, let me write this down so I have it. Continue to meet with Farmington's delegation on a yearly basis to explore ways to decrease reliance on local property taxes, such as but not limited to
Cost sharing
Cost.
with other
cost sharing.
with other municipalities.
Okay, and with other municipalities, and I'm not sure if I'm out of order.
Cost sharing with other municipalities. Is that?
Yeah, that's.
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Other items for 4? All those in favor of Goal 4, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Goal 5.
I move to approve Goal 5's page 12 through 17.
Second.
Oh, okay. Oh, I have just one piece I can start with, and that is on page 15. And this is the new piece to stay abreast of current education trends and creating facilities. I think this should be eliminated, and it's not because, as I said before, education is not important. Education has its own goal, and I don't think it's our business to be. This is really for the Board of Education and the superintendent, and not the town council. So I feel that this is inappropriate here. We certainly have it in our plan because we feel it is one of the most important things.
Which number is this that you're discussing?
It's on number 15, and it's at 5.2. It's right underneath that, where it says new.
Number 25.
Screen on the left.
Green desired
Green on the
outcomes.
left. New, it says new. Yeah, that's what it is. And just, I mean, I talked about it before, that we've had a lot of conversations with the schools about this, and they provide the outcomes and the goals, and I think it's certainly appropriate to have everything that we talked about with our ad hoc committees with Farmington High School, and absolutely necessary for us to be doing that. But I'd like to ask for this to be eliminated.
Madam
Go ahead,
Chair,
Sophie.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I understand your rationale, and it makes sense to me. My question is, then we move this new to ad hoc committee's goal, although I guess it was part of the building committee. Does it still fit with the endorse and track goals for elected and appointed boards and commissions and department work plans? I mean, I see the ad hoc committees fitting in well with creating facilities that support the Board of Education. I'm just trying to make sure that the goals.
I did move that goal.
Okay.
Yeah, because I did move it because I added the new one, the green, and then I thought that fit in well. So the goal before was not, it was in the infrastructure, which is more, I think, under transportation and land. So it was, let's see if I could just look at this.
Sure.
It was back on where the old high school building committee was under,
Is it page 5? Ken?
2, right? Yeah.
2.7?
yeah, 2.7. Yes, it was in there. So I think it should go back.
I agree with that premise, and I mean, I think it's a good point. It doesn't fit into the new category if we remove that, but I agree with modifying it like you had said, Nancy, and then to Patty's point, moving it back to 2.7.
Yes, it's pages 16, 15, 16.
I'm getting myself confused because I can't find it in my book. For a matter of time, I think we know what we're saying here. Can we just, I'll move it back to the original where the high school committee was. I just can't put my hands on it right now.
So I have a question about that.
Sure.
So when we talk about moving it back, the way the desired outcome reads is, if I'm getting this placed right, promote the maintenance, improvement, and expansion of infrastructure. It's a very general goal. We're looking at 2.7.
Sorry, what was your question?
So when we talk about moving that number 26
Under 2.7, you're saying?
Under,
Is that what we're talking about doing?
Correct.
Under 2.7,
Yep.
which reads, promote
Yes.
the maintenance, improvement, and expansion of infrastructure.
Yes,
correct.
right. That's where it was before, the building committee.
So because we go back and forth sometimes and we say, schools are part of the town, but they're separate, but they're part, and then, with our budget coming together, once it's done separately, would we want to include some language about, just to highlight, clearly we're focused on school facilities right now, given our last budget and the new ad hoc committees, but perhaps adding some specific language just to say to include
Well, we do that.
educational infrastructure.
We do that when the board sends us information, a statement of needs, correct. We don't do it, it's not our place to do it initially. It's the school's place to bring that to us.
But as
is
a
what I'm
town
saying.
goal, that we're just recognizing that school infrastructure is also included in this piece of the infrastructure that we maintain and we look to improve it.
As recommended by the Board of Education.
So just to be clear, you're talking about the desired outcome, modifying that verbiage to say what, including but not limited to school facilities?
I don't know. I'd be more apt to ask the superintendent and the board. I mean, I talked with the superintendent about this previously, about that, how important the schools are to us, and that's why we have goal number 1, a standalone. And I don't know.
Okay, let me just, I feel like lost my place like 6 times, but I think I found it now where I am. So now, you're saying on the desired outcomes on 2.7, correct? About maybe making a modification on that? Am I correct on that? Okay. And then we'd add the goal back in on the goals on that side, correct? Is that what we're
Yes.
saying? Okay. I think it's something easy, again, I don't think it would be huge to say, promote and maintenance, improvement, and expansion of town-wide infrastructure. And then that includes everything town-wide, and schools are considered town-wide infrastructure.
I think that word is fine.
I think
Town-wide infrastructure. Because that encompasses everything.
So Paul, because we made the motion to talk about goal 5, but we're moving and modifying
Well,
something,
You can still do that.
we can? Okay.
Yeah. So let me help you a little bit. Your amendment would be to eliminate the new goal on desired incomes for goal number 26 and goal 26-2. You're going to eliminate the goal, the desired outcome. You're going to move number 26 to make it 7.A and include expansion of townwide infrastructure in the desired outcome of 2.7.
Yes.
So moved, yeah.
Instead of 7A, why don't we just make it 8, since we
Yes.
already did away
Yes.
with
Why don't
8?
we just say after 7? After 7.
Oh, we did away with 8.
Yes, we did.
We got rid of 6 and kept 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Oh,
kept
yes.
That was the first thing I was here for.
Yeah.
We kept 8, we got rid of
kept-
6.
But we got rid of 6, so we can just change those numbers.
I got rid of
We
8.
have to reorder them probably.
We're going to reorder them.
All right, all right. So we're going to put it
Okay.
on,
After 7.
I would just say after
that's a good idea.
after existing 7, so we know it's in there.
so we're going to eliminate the new desired outcome under 5.2.
Yeah. Move 26 to after existing goal 7, and add on 2.7 before infrastructure.
After 7 of transportation and land.
Yep, and transportation and land. And add townwide infrastructure and desired outcome 2.7.
And change desired outcome to 2.7.
Do we need that as an amendment, Paul?
This is an amendment.
Oh,
We're
okay.
gonna get that.
I just,
And who made this amendment?
I'm sorry,
Who made this amendment?
who made the amendment and the?
Bruce?
Bruce?
And second.
Okay.
Yep.
So we have a first and a second.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paula, for getting all that into one thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was,
So we're on goal 5, right? Best
First, you have to
practices.
vote on the amendment.
Yeah, we gotta vote on it, so we gotta.
oh, sorry. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. So that was the amendment. Anything else in 5?
Madam, I know that we have these new goals. Page 13, number 21, replace, I'm just throwing it out there for a conversation, because now that we're going to have an infrastructure committee, do we want to consider this as part of their future charge, or they would come up with their future charge, or is this?
No, I think this could get moved into that.
Okay.
Bruce, I'm sorry, which one are you talking, 21?
21 on page 13.
Oh, fire, okay.
Fire.
I see, yep. So would we just motion to eliminate that?
Well, I'm just looking at the other, because yeah, I think that's the only one, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I recommend to remove that, because it'll be part of the infrastructure call.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, other thoughts in this, in number 5?
Start with the auditor selection. My question is the actual process of changing auditors. Does it require an ad hoc committee to prepare an RHP, I don't know where that came from, an RFP, to get an auditor that the town council could then review, or what would the
We have done
actual
it.
process?
We have done it both ways. What's a little bit different about the auditor is the auditor is truly the town council appointment. They work directly for the town council. Their job is to ensure that the finance and that the finance department and myself are doing their jobs correctly. We have in the past, when just as best practices, had gone out for auditor selections and had come up with recommendations to the town council, whereas the town council at that time decided that they wanted to go out and do their own RFP and do their own proposal. So again, we've done it both ways. I just wouldn't like, without having the council, you guys especially being new, not being involved in the process at all, and then us doing the work, and then it's really your appointment and not doing something that possibly you wanted with the auditors or something like that. It's pretty standard, but again, we'd go out, but we have done it after that on other times, which is more common with an auditor, would be that we would go out for the RFP, the council would have a subcommittee, you would be involved either way in the interviewing and things like that. In the past, like I said, when we have done it, we just went, we had a few bids, we went with the low bid, the staff interviewed, we picked decks, we brought it to the council then at that time decided they wanted a committee. So I think that we're kind of gun shy a little bit about it, because I guess we don't want to go through that whole process and then bring it to the council, and the council saying, we'd like to go out and have our own committee and do it. So it's, it's up to you all. It's truly your group, and, it usually you'd be interviewing and doing that type of stuff with the commission. Is that correct, Joe? No?
The way I thought you were envisioning this was right now we have a best practice. Our best practice is we put the auditor out for an RFP every 5 years. Okay, that's our best practice. We bring the recommendation to the council, and as Kathy's correct, as Kathy said, periodically the council says we want to do interviews. Other times they choose the low bid or whatever. Obviously, the concern is that we've had the same auditor since 1993. And, so you have a couple ways you can go with this ad hoc committee. One is you could review the best practice and say, we don't want to do 5 years anymore, we want to do 3 years. So you could formalize the process, as Kathy said, and have, I would do the RFP for you as your staff, turn the results over to, you could establish a committee. The ad hoc committee could decide you want to change the process and have a standing committee of the council to review the audit proposals and make a recommendation to the full council for auditors. And that, again, kind of think of this like a board game. We're going to go through steps. If we do this, we're going to do that. If we do this, we're going to do that. So really, I mean, if you want, the way I thought you were talking about this, you're going to have an ad hoc committee to look, presumably it would be 2 members of the council or 3 members of the council who would say, we want to change up the process or we want to formalize more of how we do things here. And then you can even take it a step further and have this ad hoc committee or have an audit committee of the subcommittee of the council review the audit, and review the auditor's results and then bring it back to you. So there's a lot of things you can talk about with your ad hoc committee. But I guess the basic thing is, and what I would look for from the committee would be some direction as to what you want to standardize and what you don't want to standardize. Because as I mentioned to you when I brought this to you, this kind of puts me in an awkward position when I stand up there and say to you, here's, I can't recommend to you. I'm not supposed to recommend to you, and I don't want to recommend to you an auditor, but I find myself standing up there sometimes, like this last time, defending, the low bid auditor, or the appointment of the auditor, I should say, not the low bid auditor, but the appointment of the auditor. And I'm not really supposed to do that. So really, you should determine how you want the process to go for selecting an auditor.
That's exactly what I said.
Thank you, Joe, that was helpful. So what are the thoughts?
Again, I think this is, as you can see at the beginning, this is a yellow, so it doesn't have to be done immediately. So I think I would recommend that we just keep it as a yellow, and when we go through the priorities, it's not going to happen tomorrow or maybe not over the summer, and that we can kind of vet it, and we could do some manager reports, and we can talk about it at the council meeting. But with the thought is that eventually, right now, there's a thought of getting an ad hoc committee.
Going out with it.
Okay.
Thank you, that was clarified a lot for us.
Okay.
Other thoughts with, very good. Okay, yes.
24, the ad hoc committee to improve communications and transparency with the community.
Okay.
Just a question, before we create a committee, would it be best to start with a working group to figure out what we want this committee to cover and how large a scope this would be? It can be a smaller, more manageable group to figure out how many people we want involved and how much of the public and so on would be involved.
I think that's great, but I'm not, again, whether you call it an ad hoc committee, which is a small group, or a working group, I think as long as, my feeling would be is that before we get a larger group that looks at this, that we really vet it just as a small group, whether you call it a committee or a working group, it's that the charge is really just, again, what we talked about is that a small group gets together and we look at all these different things and start making priorities about what the charge would be, sort of what you said in that infrastructure one. To set up an ad hoc committee to whatever Paula.
You expect me to remember those words, wait a minute?
Our first charge, was to create an ad hoc committee or a working group, determine what a future ad hoc committee will be focused on.
For communication and transportation. Transparency, I'm sorry.
Can I just add, I know that you have it as read in terms of immediately. I don't know if we should discuss that or not, because this could potentially be big or small, I don't know, and immediately, to me, that I think we're doing some communication, but we want to improve it. So I'm just trying to set the the expectation that we're going to achieve this, and is it something that it's one of our goals to have this, whatever this committee comes up with, within the next 12 months out, or are you really thinking, and it's just for discussion, I don't know, are you thinking that this is something that we just need to get on right away?
Well, a couple of things. I think that I've heard it a lot, and I think that I really, I'm somewhat uncomfortable when we keep on mentioning transparency, because transparency, a lack of it, in my mind, many times means it's hidden, that we're trying to hide it, and I don't like that that's kept on being said, because as the manager of this community, I don't think that's an accurate term. So I think that this whole, what transparency means to us as a group, I think needs to be vetted sooner rather than later. And I do like the term working group, and I actually like it for that first committee too, that we talked about, creating a working group to determine what the future is. And I like this, that a working group to determine that, because again, some of this stuff would be a priority. If we want to change up how our budget document is presented and what are some of the things, we actually have to start with that coming up soon, because it's going to take a long time, depending, again, what Joe said, the game, depending on which way we go. So in some ways, I just feel that this is a working group that has to kind of come up with what the future of this group would focus on. And again, I'm not saying it has to be done over the summer. I just feel that it seems like this is something that you've all it's very important, and I just would think that it would be something that I'd like to have some clarity on about what we can do better to have this transparency and communication better.
So would this be, so when you talk about a working group, just like we did for the other.
Are we amending this?
That's what we're discussing.
That's what we're
We're not there yet.
We're not there
Getting
yet.
closer, though.
That if it's a working group, it would be just a group of a few people to start and vet this, is where are we going with it?
Right.
So that's your, couple
To discuss and
council members.
determine what a future communication and transparency committee would entail.
So that would be the motion. A second?
Say it again.
Second.
But Paul wants me to
Yeah.
say
No,
it
Paula's
again.
got it this time.
To appoint a
Working group
working group
to determine
to determine
what a future ad hoc committee to improve communications and transparency would focus on. And again, this may be something with, if the ad hoc committee, this working group, maybe there's just some very things that we can do, and you don't need a whole committee to do it. Maybe we want, this is our goals. We want to improve the budget document. We'd like to do this. We'd like to do that. And you don't need a committee a standing committee that does that. I don't know. That's
I
what.
have a question on the amendment. We're entirely eliminating the wording of number 24 to replace it with what you have. What about the follow-up part on there? Is that staying?
No, the charge of the committee would not stay because we're
All
not
right, so
creating
we're going
that
to take
committee.
that charge of the committee
The
out
whole
too.
thing's
That's what we'd be
fine.
determining in this working group. Was my thinking.
Yes.
If everyone's amenable.
Okay, Beth.
So I don't know that it matters in terms of voting and the amendment and, our motion and how we're going to word this, but I did want to answer to something that Kathy mentioned, and I can completely understand where she's coming from, but I know I've been one of the people talking about transportation and communication, transparency and communication as a priority and something of major importance. But I don't see it as to imply that things are happening hidden necessarily, but I think in any organization, sometimes you're kind of going about your business and you're doing your work, and people on the outside, whether it's customers or clients, in this case residents, just don't see it, and it's not because you're doing anything necessarily wrong or you're trying to do anything necessarily impropriety, but I think we just need to be aware that whenever things are not out in the open as much as possible, that sometimes it gets people, concerned and feeling somewhat not involved, disengaged, or that they don't really know how decisions are being made and how things work. And that's just going to be an ongoing work, I think it is for any organization or municipality. So it's just, I think that's where we're coming from, is where can we tackle some of that and make some improvements and give you the resources that you need in order to do that.
Other comments, questions? Edwin?
Yeah, I agree with Beth's comments there. I don't think it's necessarily a negative on the town. I think it's trying to improve upon the transparency and communication that the town engages in with the public, and just thinking that different people consume information in different ways. Some people want to read it in the newspaper. Some people, a millennial, might want to get an electronic text message or an email. So everybody consumes information in different ways, and it's just being mindful of that and just trying to strengthen the communication and transparency of the town and the town's government with the residents here.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Anything else?
Madam Chair, just a brief comment on goal 28, which is the Green Efforts Committee. I just wanted to point out that that's actually the review, the charge of the committee. At the last meeting, we discussed that that's what we're doing at our next meeting, which is next week.
Just more of a question for the group. Could number 27 fall under the working group we just created as part of that, or should that be separate?
I think that 27 is the same sort of, it's about, again, as you've all said, is that communicating information is just always it's a struggle but all the time about trying to get information. And what I said at one of the meetings, sometimes because you don't know about it doesn't necessarily mean that we haven't tried very hard to communicate, but I also appreciate that people look at things in different ways, and how you can get people engaged is very difficult in all organizations and municipalities. I don't have any problem with this goal actually not being shown here. I just think that with the whole thing, with a lot of things that are going on in social services and some of the communication that goes, it would be something that was interesting for the council to keep it on the radar. That was my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I just want to add on to, because I didn't think of it that way, Paul, but now that, I know that it's yellow in terms of staff, so it's medium work. I'm just wondering if we do have that committee to work on it, would that person be part of that, or do you envision that person be part of that committee? And
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem really with that being, because again, if it's just a small working group, I think that part of the working group on one of the meetings that we would have is I'd bring my direct reports that we would talk about, again, the different departments and how information is communicated and some of the specific things. So I think that could, probably 27 could be moved out, and that could be part, and when Nancy is at the meeting telling you about some of the different things that she does and how it works.
so I would be in favor of taking that out and knowing that it could be part of the working group.
And maybe would it be something, we talked about the piece before being under Bill Warner. Would this be something that's
Yeah,
under Nancy's?
yes, it would be, she would still have
Her
this
goal
goal.
anyway.
Yes, she would.
So we,
Okay.
okay.
Second.
Do we have a
Change
second?
that.
Second.
Okay.
And then this is simply to eliminate goal 27.
Pardon?
To eliminate goal 27.
Yeah.
You made the motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Do we want to put that it's incorporated under another goal? Or do
We can do that.
We did that.
I don't think, I'll move it in. We got it.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Last section, goal number 6.
Wait. Oh, so we're all set with
But now you've got to
vote on goal
Oh.
5. Okay. All those in favor of goal 5, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Go.
Okay, the last section, I move to approve goal number 6, pages 18 through 19.
Second.
This is something that, again, talking about communication, that 29, again, Nancy, one of her goals and what things that we've been working about is that enhancing community events to target things. This could, again, be in her goals specifically. It's still a part of the communication type of goal. Or, again, like I said, it was something that I thought it would be of interest, but it's up to you.
Thoughts?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I see this as separate from the transparency communication that we were discussing because part of, as I read it, it's to enhance community events. So it's not just focused on communications. It's broader
Yeah.
than that. So I would leave it here rather than
Okay.
incorporate it.
Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor of goal 6, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Now. Now we're going back to prioritizing. Kathy?
I think I could probably pretty easily go through it, and how about just ones and then twos?
Okay.
Sure.
I'll just go through it as we go, and then why don't I go through it all, write the numbers down, and then anything that you guys can make changes.
And I'm
This
going
is-
to count on you to give them to me tomorrow.
Yeah, okay, so number 2, because number 1 is deleted.
Gone, yep.
So now number 2 is the Farmington Center goal, I'm making that a number 1. Number 3 is a number 1. Number 4 is a number 1. Number 5 is a number 1. Number 6 is gone. Number 7 is a number 1. Number 8, I'm going to put, that's going to be for discussion, but I think that should be a number 2. Number 9 is a number 1. Number 10 is a number 1. Number 11 is a number 1. Number 12 is a number 1. Number 13 is a number 1. Number 14 is a number 1. Number 15 is a number 1. 16 is a number 1. 17 is a number 1. 18 is a number 1. 19 is a number 1. 20 is a number 1. 21 is deleted. 22, I'm going to, again, it has to be done this year, but so I'm going to put it as a number 1, but it doesn't have to be done immediately. Number 23 is a number 1. Number 24 is a new goal, and I'd make that a number 1, but maybe not immediately. Number 25 is a number 1. Number 26 is a number 1. Number 27 is gone, but it's moved to Nancy Parent's goals. Number 28 is a number 1, and 29 is a number 1. So the only goal that I really had is a number 2. I think that, well, the auditor doesn't have to be done immediately. I don't
So
think.
wouldn't we make that a number 2?
The only problem is that when I think of number 2, I think of, I mean, you want the auditors to be done for the next auditor, so it has to be, it has to be done now. And same thing with the, it doesn't have to be done immediately, but it has to be done in the next, 3 to 6 months, I would say. What did we put for the color on that? And the communication ad hoc one, I don't think it has to be done tomorrow either. I'd put that as like a 1+, that maybe we could wait till maybe some of these other committees get started and things like that, or if you want that as a number 1 too. But I think for the summer months, we have the high school committee is going to be hot and heavy, and the Farmington Village is going to be hot and heavy. So if some of those, once they get started, I think that will free up some time, meaning that we can then try to maybe get the ad hoc committee one started, get the ad hoc committee on the auditor, and get the working group on the communications started. The only one that I'm putting as a number 2, and that's up to you, because I do think it's a really large goal, is the infrastructure goal, but that's up to you. But I'm not sure how we're going to get that in the next 6 to 8 months. I don't
Well,
know.
I guess, one of the things, I guess, and I don't know
Or we could just-
how to deal with it, but to me, the true ones is the Farmington Center Committee and the 2 Farmington High School ad hoc committees. To me, those are like 1 stars. Those to me have to be done right now. I mean, we're working with so I don't know how you can,
But, well, I
Go
think
through
though,
that.
there's these working groups, even with the infrastructure, I mean, as long as it's not immediate, gives us some time, I think that we should get that, because again, their charge is to come up with the charge. And so between that and the communications, I think they could meet sometime in 3, 4, 5 months, set it up, and then they could meet and kind of talk and come back. So I really think that, again, I think if we're prioritizing, I think what you said, Nancy, are going to be immediate. And then I think we should pretty much strive to set up these committees and at least have some meetings to get some background during this course of the next, 8 to 10 months. That's what this is about.
Can I make a point of clarification?
Yeah.
So there's 24 number
Yeah.
ones. So that doesn't necessarily mean there's 24 committees.
No.
Okay. So would it help us to understand which ones are committees and which ones are not?
Well, I think we got rid of the Farmington Center Committee as a committee. The Bicycle Committee is a committee. The Sidewalk Committee is now turned into the Infrastructure Committee. The Facility Committee is part of that same committee. The Cemetery Committee is no longer a committee. Land Acquisition's a committee, UConn's a committee, the Auditors are a committee, the Communication Transparency is a committee, the Farmington High School 2 ad cuts are a committee, and the Green Efforts. So 1, 2, 3, 4,
10.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 committees.
And based on your numbering, I'm assuming those 10 committees are all number 1.
Yeah, they're not all immediate, but yes.
Well, didn't you say the infrastructure was number 2?
I did, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think the infrastructure group, they said that we should, that the whole idea is just to
Get a
meet,
charge.
get a charge and start talking. So I think that it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to come back with recommendations all that quick, but I think they should meet and at least start talking about it.
go ahead.
Madam Chair, to your point, I think you mentioned the 2 high school ad hoc committees in Farmington Center were your top 3 priorities. I'm wondering if instead of a 1 and a 2, if we should have a 1, 2, and a 3, whereas 1 might be something that is occurring in the first 1 to 3 months, 2 is 4 to 6, and 3 is maybe 4 to 8, and then 3 is further out. I just know in my own life, prioritizing 24 ones is not really prioritizing. Because it's 24 things. So I'm not, I think all of those items are important, and I think one of the challenges is truly figuring out what the priorities are, even though all 24 of those items, you said 24, right, Bruce?
Yes.
Are important.
Well, now 25 if you add infrastructure. but-
Okay. So I think it might be helpful if we broke it down a little bit further.
Okay, so Farmington Center, a 1, right? Bicycle Committee, so what are we going to stay with the ad there?
I don't think the Bike Committee and Green Efforts to me aren't, I don't know why we need to prioritize. I mean, you already have your committees. So you're going to be working with your committees and bringing it to us. So I don't even see that's just my thought. And the
I
land
agree.
acquisition, the same, and the
Okay.
UConn that I don't see that as a we just get rid of all those on here. Not, not get rid of the committees, you just do your work.
But
And we do our
understand that
work.
they're still ones.
Right.
Because if they're not ones, then the staff would be doing other things. So they're important committees, they take time, their agenda, so to me, they're ones. That's why you're picking that committee over another committee for us to be staffing. That, unless it's, again, we can staff more than one, but that to me is still top, that's where we're spending our time.
Question.
Yeah.
Because I was going to make the same suggestion, maybe break it up into threes, but based on what you're saying, Kathy, could we do all, they're all ones right now, could we do them all without adjusting the staff in any way and with the staff we have, or?
I think as long as, I think that when some of these workshop ones, the facility one and the communication one, I think they need to go and just meet and see where we stand with that and decide if that's going to be, a 3 or a 2. Or again, like Patty, I said, maybe it doesn't have to be done right away. It can be done, not immediately. These are a year's goal. It could be, between a 2 and a 3 that we start looking at that, which probably would help us out because both the high school and the Farmington Center is happening now, and it's happening during the summer months. And so you're already going to be into September before you know it. And so maybe Farmington Center a 1, the bike committee still a 1 because it's a standing committee, land acquisition 1, Yukon committee is a 1, the auditor selection committee is a 2, communication and transparency a 2, and then 1. Oh, we did a little better. Green efforts is a 1. And the infrastructure one is a 2.
And I do see some of these evolving if we want to know about information before budget. I mean, if we feel that these impact that, or in some way, we're going to have to talk about them before, next year. But I mean, I think we all kind of felt a bit overwhelmed with what we've done so far. I mean, we talked about how many meetings we've had, just our council, which has been a lot more than normally the council even has. So I think people are feeling a little overwhelmed, as well as Kathy's staff. Kathy. So that's just a concern of mine that, and the summer is coming where we have things we need to focus on and do well on and not kind of just filter out ours.
So can I just throw something out there? Because and I keep on looking at the bicycle committee, so I'm sorry, CJ. It's green, and I'm going along with Patty's recommendation, and this is 12 to 24 months. So to me, that's for the next 2 years that this committee is going to be working on this. Would it make sense, and I'm throwing this out there, should that really be a number 2 or number 3? Because they're already working on it, and they have a long time to work on it. Just throwing it out there. It's not like they're not working on it. It's just...
There's no problem to throw it out there.
I'm just asking the question.
Getting anyone to agree is a different.
Right.
I think part of what Kathy's saying is there's staff that's dedicated to that currently. They're in the process of working on it. So you would actually be taking people away from what they're currently doing if you made that a 2.
I think one of the things, again, this is a fluid document. If we start with some of the understanding that there's the ones and then some of these other ad hoc workshop groups would be a little bit later on in the year. And then we have to look at it because if the workshop for the infrastructure comes up with 10 objectives that has to do with staffing that's used for some of these other groups, then we're going to have to reprioritize everything again because we're not sure what they are going to be.
Well, just like the auditor or the communication, I suppose. If you find your charge, then we'll see where you go, just like the infrastructure. So that's just kind of the working committee, as you said, get together, see maybe in the fall sometime, if that seems amenable to people.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out what would be a good way of looking at things in terms of priority, because it's not like the work is not, I don't anticipate, even if we prioritize it 1 through 3, that the work is just stopping. Especially if it's something has been our goal for, I'm just trying to figure out, because I'm struggling too with all the everything is a priority, and that's not reality, I guess, unless we have the staff to support it.
Right. Well, and again, I don't, my issue is, again, this is the goals and objectives that I'm being rated on, and so, again, if it's a 2 to me, your idea is that it may not happen on this period of time that we're talking about, and that concerns me because I think the expectation is that some of that is going to happen. It doesn't have to happen in 2 or 3 months. It may happen at the end of the term, but some of these things, like now, if it became the communication one, you know, if we took this on in April or May, is that something that would really be acceptable? I don't think that's really where we're at. I think that we want that. I think we want that sooner. The auditor's the same thing.
So,
I just didn't think in the next 2 or 3 months.
No.
So I'm just looking at, and I'm going to take out the word bicycle committee. I'm just looking at green, meaning that we need to start working on it now. And everything else is yellow, meaning that it's very low cost, low complexity and stuff like that. So I envision that work is still happening. It's happening now, but it's still happening because it's low complex,
Yep.
Staff is low, everything is low. So why wouldn't a committee like that, and again, I'm not using bicycle, I'm just using those color charts. And I don't look at number 2 as being something that it may not happen. I'm looking at number 2 is that it's not a lot of strain on the staff to continue to support this.
Right. I mean,
Maybe the difference is some of these are working committees to come up with a charge rather than a full-blown, we don't want everybody. So maybe that's the difference.
Based on your definitions, Kathy, if you say we can do all this in the next year with the staff we have, then it makes, because I was initially saying, yeah, how can we have 24/1? But if that's what we can do, and that's what we can do, based on kind of Bruce and Patty, what you guys are saying, if the definition is a 1 is in the next 2 to 3 months, we can, I don't call that A, B, C. I mean, I don't, but just maybe it's just two different definitions of what priority is. Is it 3 in the first 3 months, or is it in the next year?
right, and that's
And
how
I think that's what we're talking. You're
look at
viewing it over the next
Yes.
year, and
Right.
it's just 2 different definitions of
Yeah.
word.
Right.
Well,
Well,
I'm compartmentalizing the year. Yeah.
Well, and also the other thing is, Bruce, and I appreciate, like right now, probably the green and the land and the bike committee, like I said, are probably in the staffing realms, probably a 2, you know, and that's why we can do these other things, we can have workshops and meet. But if the bike committee decides that they want to do something that's very much extensive with the engineering department and this and that, those same people would be the same people that if the infrastructure committee says we want to do sidewalks and we have to do inspections and we have to do that, then everything, the dynamics all change because it's the same people, you know, that would be doing both of those. And that's why I think of it as the year right now, but maybe 1's is stuff that is happening relatively soon and 2's are happening later on in the year. That's kind of what I think of that as. Until we evaluate and see what the charges come back at, to see what a lot of these things have to come back and have to look at it to see if we can accomplish these things.
Well, I guess that's the piece I see, Kathy, is them coming back now. Like the infrastructure meets the bike, if there are certain things, you're coming back to tell us what's going on. So, you know, CJ?
Kathy, for comparison points, in past years, when you have a dozen or 2 dozen goals, how many are 1s, how many are 2s, how many are 3s? How is the breakup generally?
They're usually all 1s.
Okay.
Occasionally, we have some 2s in there. but
So
most
what
of them-
we've prioritized as our goals, because we made it a goal, it's generally a 1. I think that's part of the discussion here, because we're all looking at it saying we want to do 24 things. What's the most important thing? What's the least important thing? But really, we've already set out, these are all the important things we want to do this year.
Right.
So
how I
they
look
are
at
all
it.
1s. Okay.
That's how I look at it.
Well,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
and the way I see it, to kind of follow up on that, is if at any point down the road, like you said, engineering is being overworked or something, obviously Kathy can come to us and say, we can't do all this the way it is. What are your priorities as a town council between these 2 things? If that comes up, maybe that doesn't come up. Maybe everything happens in parallel, no problem.
Right, and that's why we try to, you know, ebb and flow of how things work and things like that. But I think we'll all know, like, if the because we're all talking about it, if the communication group has 7 charges that are going to be changed that deal with finance, that's going to put stress on, and then we're going to have to reevaluate some of the different things. But really, the goal for me now is getting those committees set up, where I'm having a metric that says, I made a priority to have an infrastructure committee. They've met, they've started talking. Now, if they're not moving that fast because they have a lot to do, that's fine, but I've met my goal of getting it set up and trying to facilitate. Now, where the problem would be is that if the group keeps on asking for more and more information, and I can't keep getting that information to you while I'm staffing a high school committee, and then that's when I have a conversation about it.
Right.
That it's just not, there's just not, and that's what we have to reevaluate.
Okay.
So just going on the point that if all of these are ones, so in the beginning of the conversation, before we even started talking about this, where there are some things that if we prioritize this, we may not get to it, or if we prioritize something and it was low on the priority list, but we were able to get to it, we would just pick it up because it's a document of working. But now I'm hearing that this document, the expectation is that it's all going to be done in 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions, comments? Okay.
Do we want to actually vote on the priorities then, or just, I think we're kind of all in a consensus that we...
If I'm hearing from Kathy that she feels as the town manager that they can support this in the next 2 years, and obviously if anything pops up, it will be coming in front of us, but we're expecting that in the next 2 years that these things are being worked on and we're making movement on all of this. I guess that's what I'm hearing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, yes, absolutely. But again, what would happen though is that my goal is appointing these committees and then charging the committees that go. Now, again, if the committees come back with substantial charges then we would be looking at this document again. And I would say, listen, this ad hoc facility committee versus the ad hoc communication committee, one of them has to be a priority. And then you'd say, okay, we're not going to deal with facilities for another year. We're going to take on this because it's just too much. That would be a true priority. But right now, it's kind of setting the groundwork for all of these things.
Just keep your color coding in the document so
Yes.
we know that.
Okay. Any other comments? I think we're all set then. We have no executive session.
I move to adjourn.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.